of the Center for Economic and Policy Research. Now, put this into perspective for us. We hear this being described as the fiscal cliff, but it's more of a fiscal slope.
Yeah, that's exactly right. This has been hugely overplayed in the sense that nothing really happens January 1st. I mean, obviously, it would be good to get a deal today. It would have been good to have a deal a month or 2 months ago so that there was a little more, expectation, certainty about the future. But we aren't paying taxes January 1st. What this means is if there's no deal, this drags on, say a couple weeks in January, some people will see more money deducted out of their paycheck. That will be returned when there is a deal. The issue is, when there will be a deal, and virtually everyone agrees there's going to be a deal somewhere sometime soon. Congress and the President are not going to let the full tax increases kick in. They're not going to let these full spending cuts take effect. So the impact on the economy is likely to be fairly small, and most of what we do see is almost certainly going to be intended.
Well, the markets seem relatively calm at the moment in accord with what you are saying, but there has to eventually be an agreement reached. They've had a long time to reach it so far. They haven't. How long do they have left realistically?
Well, we may well see this drag on into the next session of Congress. It's important to understand that, we get a new Congress sworn in January 3rd, and there's a number of reasons that it may be more convenient for them to wait till after that period. One, Speaker Boehner, the head of the Republicans in the House, would get reelected on January 3rd. After that, he might feel he has more room to negotiate. Secondly, once we pass the cliff, the deadline, January 1st, at that point, the discussion is over tax cuts. We're subject to higher tax rates. The Bush-era tax cuts have expired. And then the question is, whose taxes are you going to cut, not whose taxes are you going to increase? That would be a lot easier thing for the Republicans to talk about. So it's entirely possible we'll have more room for negotiating, more room for bargaining after January 3rd.
But in terms of the fact that they weren't able to, that they came so close, but they weren't able to agree, there's a lot of stonewalling, a lot of passing the buck. Is it not rather embarrassing for U.S. politics?
Well, yes. I mean, it is. Unfortunately, this isn't the first time. If you go back to the summer of 2011, where we came near defaulting on the debt, and again, entirely because there was this refusal to raise the debt ceiling, something that exists in no other country. Congress had already appropriated all the spending, and some were saying we're not going to pay for spending we had appropriated. So, of course, it's embarrassing. I mean, it's really ridiculous to have this sort of standoff on so many issues. I mean, the list you gave was long, but there are many, many others, just really absurd points where there's no dispute between the parties, but it's pure and simply holding things hostage so that you have better negotiating position. So
you do feel optimistic that this will be resolved, that they will come to an agreement, and as one of those things on the list, $2,000 in taxes for an average family, they won't have to pay that?
Absolutely. Now, some of the things you had mentioned, we had the payroll tax cut, 2 percentage points off the Social Security tax that was put in as a stimulus measure. That may well end, and that's because there's not a commitment to continue it. So I always distinguish between sort of the cliff items that everyone agrees on, and that's most of those tax increases. And then there are some areas where there are differences between President Obama and Congress, and presumably we'll end up somewhere in the middle on those.
Okay, Dean Baker from the Center of Economic and Policy Research.